This month, we have some good PinePhone hardware news, more info about our LoRa projects, and more. Thanks to all the people who contributed to this community update, and if you want more videos about FOSS stuff, check out my channel, Pizza Loving Nerd. This is the video version of the community update, and this doesn't have as many details as the blog post, but this video will give you the synopsis. Let's get into it. PinePhone and Pinebook Pro shipping has gone pretty smoothly and without any major hiccups. Some PinePhones heading to Europe have seen a minor delay because of a DHL paperwork mishap, so a few people are still waiting for their devices as a result of this. However, everything has been sorted out now, so you should get your PinePhone order very shortly if you ordered prior to April 15th. For more info on shipping, check out the shipping thread on the forum, and we are also considering a shipping info page on the main Pine64 website instead of the forum as a nicer way to organize information, so let us know what you think of that idea. As for the silicon shortage, we will continue with March's plan and only sell things we know can be manufactured without issues. In short, you will see SBCs and other devices drift in and out of stock on a regular basis. As always, you can stay up to date on product stock on social media websites like Twitter as well as the Telegram news channel. In other news, the SO Edge, our RK1808 AI module, is finally available for purchase, and the hammerhead tip for the PineSoul has been delivered from the factory, which means you should be able to purchase it very soon. We would also like to share some info about our cluster that we've been using to host our services. After a year of temporary hosting, we are now moving to a new permanent server rack. The move might cause some disruptions in the chat bridge, and the forum may be temporarily locked to prevent data loss. There isn't a set date for the move, but there will be a heads up beforehand. Lastly, there is a new website dedicated to Pine64 devices called Pine Guild from the same people behind FOSS2Go. They are seeking contributors, so if you are eager to do some writing about your Pine64 device, you got yet another outlet. At the end of April, we announced the release of AffiniTime 1.0, and also the fact that the PineTime is now an enthusiast-grade end-user product. This is great for devs who can be proud of their accomplished work, but also for users who will soon be able to buy a PineTime ready to use. Advanced users and developers can also buy a pack that includes both a sealed device and a dev kit if you want to do some more experimentation with the watch. If you want to see a good overview of AffiniTime 1.0, check out my review on the PineTime, and thanks to JF for putting that in the community update so I could self-promote it in this video. Since the release of AffiniTime 1.0, there have been several pull requests from people, including a new step app, new watch faces, new wake-up features, and much more. Developers have also been having fun creating new watch faces like this cool Casio watch face, and the flying pizza watch face with my logo. GadgetBridge has also released an update that adds new features such as improved notifications and a Find My Device function, as well as a better battery indicator in the UI for GadgetBridge. And the GTK companion app Siglo also got a release that runs in the background and shows notifications for SMS text messages on the PineTime. Next up, we have a bunch of good news to share about the PinePhone. For one, the Pine Store has been able to secure PinePhone production for the entire rest of the year. We are aiming for rolling production for the remainder of the year, which means that if nothing goes wrong, you will be able to pre-order a PinePhone anytime for the rest of the year. However, because of the Hong Kong border closings with China, it will still be shipped in batches. The next batch of PinePhones has already been scheduled and will start early next month. In other news, the PinePhone keyboard units have been assembled and shipped to a few people. Last month we shared some engineering prototypes, but now we have internal review units that are much more polished. The keycaps look great, and the texture of the chassis has been matched to the PinePhone's back case, and from the photos, it looks great. As for availability, it depends on a couple of things. One, the membranes need to be done, so it will depend on how fast the new membranes are finished, but also the I2C HID driver needs to be ported to the PinePhone, and there are still some mandatory torture tests on the keyboard to make sure it is safe and conforms to our standards. Lastly, the wireless charging and the LoRa case will start shipping for the PinePhone next month, and the fingerprint scanner case will arrive somewhat later. The wireless charging case should work out of the box on the PinePhone, but the LoRa case will be marketed strictly for developers, as code still needs to be developed to make it functional. Megapixels, the PinePhone's camera app, has just released its 1.0 version with a GTK4 port instead of GTK3, which allows for GPU acceleration for the camera preview, which makes it a lot more smooth. And there's also some UI changes because GTK4 adds the ability to draw UI widgets above the camera preview. This means that the shutter and exposure settings screens are now replaced by dropdowns, and the preview image now extends below the camera controls. The blue tint bug in the camera was also fixed, although image post-processing hasn't been changed at all, but the better image preview makes it easier to take good photos. The modem also now has voice over LTE support with support for both 8 kHz and 16 kHz sample rate. The two main limitations right now is the sample rate must be matched to the PinePhone's audio system, which means that if the audio is set to 8 kHz, for example, all other audio streams in the OS have to match that sample rate, which reduces sound quality. The stock firmware is also not designed to switch sample rate at runtime, which means for the time being, changing the sample rate requires a reboot. The modem itself is capable of going up to 48 kHz for its sampling rate, however the closed source binaries and stock kernel firmware right now prevent this. Luckily, with the custom modem firmware, you can go up to 48 kHz for the sample rate by using an AT command. Our LoRa project is now called PineDio. This is the official name for the entire Pine64 LoRa ecosystem of gateways and endnodes. We have also fast-forwarded the project to late June, where we will simultaneously release the PineDio indoor and outdoor gateways, a USB and SPI endnode, and the PinePhone LoRa backcase. Once they are built and delivered, we will have an announcement post that will include pricing for individual components. We are also partnering with Rack Wireless, an industry-leading IoT provider providing high-end LoRa gateways, sensors, kits, and gateway modules. Developers have been working on gateway prototypes and have already gotten far with endeavors. The gateway is already fully functional, and both the Rack Wireless LoRa module and GPS are already working after some modifications to the software. Both JF and RTP have managed to connect their gateways to the Things Network and Chirp Stack with working local gateways. JF was even able to receive messages from a LoRaWAN device on the PineDio, and RTP was able to send beacons from the PineDio gateway with working GPS. As such, it appears the gateway code is good to go, and most of the work required at this point involves endnodes. We expect that the USB endnode will be made to work very quickly since we have third-party help. However, the SPI endnode and the PinePhone backcase using I2C will require additional input from the development community. Once all these endnodes work with Pine64's SBCs and devices, we will start exploring LoRa's potential for peer-to-peer and group messaging. Earlier this month, we shipped the second revision of Core64 Model A and B to developers. The new board features several minor hardware fixes as well as the new Ethernet PHY mentioned in the last community update to avoid a price hike. As long as no other board issues are found in the next 2 weeks, production of the Core64 will start shortly. The software still isn't ready for prime time, however it has still been a truly monumental effort from developers given how lightning fast the progress has been in its early stages. Given how young the SoC is and how few Core64 boards there are, this first production run of the hardware will solely be aimed at developers and not end users yet. As for software, a significant amount of needed patches for the SoC have already been submitted to the mainline kernel, and a few things have already been accepted. As things stand, the GPIO, pin control, IOMMU-V2, thermal, RK817 codec, GMAC, PCI, and power domain patches have already been submitted to mainline as well as the basic device tree. The new GMAC PHY has been enabled and the SATA controller has been validated to work very well. The PCIe controller is also in good shape, and every card we tested except GPUs work out of the box. We are also trying to spin up the Mali GPU using Panfrost, but the Panfrost driver still needs some porting over. The new I2S driver will also need to be ported for sound output to work, and work has begun on mainline U-boot, but depends on the ATF sources, which we are still waiting for. Over the past month, many people have received their Pinebook Pro and has been met with a lot of positivity and praise. And over the past 2 months, we have seen several additions to the platform's software portfolio. Peter Robinson, the principal architect for Red Hat, came out with a guide on getting Fedora 34 running on the laptop. These instructions will land you a mainline Fedora build with accelerated graphics and the GNOME desktop. A lot of people have been wanting to run Fedora on the Pinebook Pro for a while, so make sure to let Peter know you appreciate his work. For those of you who prefer GNOME over KDE, you can now rejoice as you now have both an Armbian image, which we covered last month, and a Manjaro image ready to go running GNOME. Manjaro 2104 with the GNOME desktop has full functionality, including working GPU acceleration in the desktop and a custom U-boot, allowing other OSs to boot from SD when Manjaro is installed to the internal eMMC. Unfortunately, Pinebook Pro production has been temporarily put on halt. The component shortages make it difficult to source the necessary parts to continue with manufacturing. The production team has done a lot of research to try and pump out another batch in quarter 2 or 3, but ultimately chose against proceeding. Right now, we can't confidently say when the Pinebook Pro will be back, but we suspect no less than 3 months before we can even consider producing more. This statement is based on the current market situation, which could change at any time, so we will let you know when production becomes viable again. Anyways, that's it. Stay tuned for more updates in the future, and I'll see you later.